Welcome to the F50 Woman Podcast, dedicated to sharing stories from a diverse community of women in order to provoke you into a passionate pursuit of life, build unshakable character, and achieve extraordinary things. Now, here is your host, Julia Jack.
She is a powerhouse, pun intended. As a young girl, she was poor but well influenced. She always tried to do the right thing, while very much wanting to know the what, the why, and the how of everything. She was fascinated with things that affected society and why humans treated each other the way they did. Now, her confidence is off the charts, but it strangely and wonderfully makes you, when you're with her, feel even more powerful too. I could listen to this podcast every morning just to get my shot of superpower, superwoman audio juice. You have to hear this chat with Leticia Colon de Mejias, another F50 woman. Hey, hello, F50 Woman podcast listeners. Thank you so much for joining. We are here today with Leticia Colon de Mejias, and I like her name, the poetry of her name. She is an amazing woman who is just doing incredible things. She is creating a generation of sustainable thinkers. First of all, I just want to say welcome.
Thank you for having me. From one phenomenal woman to another, I am honored to be here.
And you know, I know capturing your time is hard, so I'm so grateful to have you here. I just want to let everybody know I met you several years ago, and I was just so totally impressed. And it's not just because you're doing great things, it's because the great things you're doing didn't come easy. And I just love younger women and even us older women to really understand how you did it. But not only that, have inspiration that no matter how easy or how hard or whatever challenges we face, you can do it. And so I'm looking forward to hearing your story, where you came from, where you are, and some of those lessons you learned in the middle so we can grow from them. So why don't we just start off and learn about who you were as a younger woman? Tell us about you.
Yeah, thank you. So as a young girl, I'm a mixed race. So my mom is Italian and my father, both my parents have passed, but my mom was Italian and my dad was Puerto Rican from the island directly. Really interesting time that they were together. That wasn't a thing that was like happening all the time. As a child, I really tried hard to be a good person. I wanted to impress my parents and do the right things. I was very friendly, very outgoing, talkative, and extremely inquisitive. And that has never failed me. I'm still very inquisitive. I always wanted to know the what, why, and how. Probably drove my parents crazy. I was lucky enough to have parents that were both school teachers by trade. And so they didn't mind to dig into the detail when I would ask them, like, why does the sun work? Or where do plants come from? I just really love to explore information and dig deep into topics. I often got lost in books. Loved to read as a child, still love to read as an adult. Really would get lost in books. And I was really fascinated by concepts of societal impacts. I really was fascinated with things like the Holocaust. This was something as a child I perseverated over. Also, the way Native Americans were treated was something I was concerned about, and slavery. I always had kind of an eye on being concerned about why humans treated other humans like they weren't humans. This was something I could not understand as a child. So
that's interesting. And do you think all of that curiosity came because of your parents' influence? That was just your nature? You were naturally, I think you mentioned it, but I'm wondering what influenced what?
I definitely was naturally inquisitive. I was blessed with grandparents who were very much involved in my life. My mother's parents spent a lot of time with me, and they were from Italy, and they were really into growing their own food, curing food, storing food, cooking things freshly. They were really into organics when organics wasn't a word,
Right.
So they were into like foraging for mushrooms. And I think that direct immersion in nature and in hands-on learning, it sparks inquisitiveness. And it really I think that science-based approaches to things, my grandparents never called it science, but it was, right? If you're preserving food or you're growing something, or you're learning about what type of mushroom is safe to eat, what isn't, or why beans grow on a pole better, it is science. Science is life, I often say. And when you expose a child to that hands-on type of learning, it just turns their brain afire and they just want to keep learning more and more.
Yeah. And you're hitting on 2 points that I think I'm learning a lot lately, is that the younger you influence, it just becomes part of who they are, for the better or for the worse. It can go either way. And the other thing that I'm learning, I think, from hearing a lot of different stories, is that the influences you have can either become your superpower or become your
nemesis.
Your nemesis. Beautiful word. Yes. Yeah. So I love that you shared where all that came from. And so this is a perfect time for us to hear who you are now, what you do, what you're passionate about, and then we'll go back and learn what made all that happen, where the turning point was.
Sure. So who I am now is such a hard thing to define,
Yeah.
I think it really is. So, I do a lot of things. So when people ask me, what do you do now? Oftentimes my answer is whatever I want. And that's pretty true. I'm at a place in my life where I am blessed enough to have done so many things as a young person and have so many mentors and outlets. And what I like to frame as superpowers, that we each have these hidden superpowers deep within us, and that when we explore those superpowers, we can bring them out and they can become our life. And so my superpowers today, really, Julia, are I write books. I write reports, I write comic books and graphic text. I teach kids and adults about energy and the environment. I teach about law and civic engagement. I seek to spark joy and passion in everyone I meet. And I still want to learn as much as possible and share what I know, because this is the warrior way. I try to defend and protect and speak on things that matter to humans and nature, or I say a warrior for people on the planet. And I literally work in the clean energy industry, employing 27 people in jobs that are, writing policy, installing energy saving measures like air sealing, insulation, energy audits, solar energy, electric mini splits. I create educational content and do workforce programs across the nation. And I work on public policy. And I'm also an entrepreneur. I own a few nonprofits that seek to educate and engage people on the interconnectedness of humans and nature, as well as issues like economic resilience, the infrastructure of America, and food. All these areas are areas that I work in.
And so do you believe that if we implemented and we really started taking hold of a lot of these energy efficiency, environmental measures that we talk about, do you think that we can really turn things around?
Yes, I 100% believe that anything is possible when we work together. I think that the only thing that is holding us back locally, nationally, and internationally as a world of people who breathe air and drink water and have red blood inside of us is that we are confused as a nation and as a world. There is this false sense that we are not connected. This false reality that you, Julia, are different from me, Leticia, or that I am different from President Trump or President Biden or Kamala Harris. When in reality, we are literally just human beings that have the honor and privilege of walking the earth at the same time as one another. And it's a blessing every day to get up and take a breath, and be able to breathe and drink water and eat food and experience this world that has been created by whatever created it. No one can really say definitely and certainly where we are, who we are, where we come from. We have theories and hypotheses, right? But at the end of the day, all we know is that we are here and that we should take advantage of this opportunity. And so I think that if we just had a little bit more gratitude for the things that we're given, like life, and the opportunity to become whatever we want, if we should desire to be something, and that if we looked at life through this lens of opportunity, that we would be much happier and thus much more engaged in opportunities. So I think that we could build clean energy systems that work. I do it every day. I know it works. I think that we could draw down energy demand by 30% just by paying attention to how we're utilizing the resources we have in our homes, buildings, businesses. We could insulate, we could air seal, we could turn lights off, we can unplug them. We could take that charger out of the wall when it's not charging our phone. That simple act of paying attention can draw down energy demand by 10 to 15%, Julia. 10 to 15% of American energy is the equivalent of the use of energy in Italy for an entire year. So just by paying attention, we could drop our demand by 10 to 15%. And then by taking action, we could drop it by 30. Now we're at 45%. Now all we need to do is ramp up our clean energy resources by 60%. So it's about how you look at the problem. And often what I find is that we get so lost in things that we become our own enemy. Instead of taking small actionable steps forward, we argue and perseverate over nonsense and take no action at all.
Yeah. And does it come out of fear, or it comes out of that you're asking me to be uncomfortable?
I think it's both.
Okay.
Right? People are afraid of what they don't know. So if you think about this, I believe all things are interconnected. I believe the concept that all things are connected. I believe that poverty is connected to race. I believe that that's connected to like historical, systemic, disparities. I believe that the lack of resources in communities of color come from the fact that we're not exposed to things early. And so we don't know about civic engagement or economics or about, how to save money or how to get off of, public assistance. It's that we don't know. Likewise, I believe that people who have things don't know what it is to not have things. And therefore they think that we could bootstrap it to the top, or that we're being lazy, or we just don't want to try, or we're just trying to take advantage. When in reality, it's just that both sets of groups just don't know the other side's experience. And that lack of understanding leads to miscommunications and fear. Likewise, the transition to a clean energy economy, people who work in the fossil fuel industry are afraid of loss. When in reality, loss could equal opportunity. They might get better jobs. They might have less stressful careers. They might not be mining in open pits. They might be able to work in my industry where people are making a minimum of $15 an hour, making up to $100,000 a year with a high school diploma and a couple certifications.
Yeah. I hope everybody's listening because I'm hearing you, and I completely agree. So tell us how you got from point A, your younger woman, to where you are now. What was the big turning point? Was there a big lesson you learned? What can you share with us, even if it's just, do this?
Sure.
Tell us about that.
Life is a compilation of points, right? Each of us experience negative things and positive things. And ultimately, it's how we frame those things. Yeah. So I like to say this, Julia. The life is determined by your belief system. I like to make that belief system short, and I call it your BS.
Okay. Yes, I like that.
Depending on your BS is the framework you're working through, right? Mm-hmm. So if your belief system, your BS is that I am not good enough, or I cannot be successful, or if your BS is, it's easier to stay on Section 8 and get this check because I have this kid early versus I'm going to make a career path for myself and I'm going to choose to do whatever it is I want to define myself as, for example, then that's the life you live until you get sparked or awoken, as these people are calling it these days. I'm woke, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, sometimes you get woke, right? So I was really lucky to have, my father was a fire walking instructor. So I've been walking on fire since I was like about 7 years old.
What?
So this type of thing, it does something to your brain. It tells you all things are possible.
Wow.
When you conquer the fear of fire as a child and you learn to walk across hot coals, when somebody says to you, you can't do that, my brain responds, no, you can't do that. I'm about to do it right now. Watch me. Right?
Yeah.
That's what I learned as a child. I was blessed to learn that whenever someone told me, no, you cannot, Leticia, I literally didn't hear them. My response in my brain was, no, you cannot.
Yeah.
So that's the framework. And I say these 4 things to people. One is there are 4 T's of life: time, talent, tenacity, and teamwork. If you apply those 4 T's to anything, you can do it. Because even if you don't have the capacity, like last year I was in a wheelchair and I couldn't walk, so I couldn't do things I wanted. Right. But I had people who could, and I used that teamwork, right, and my talent of coaching to tell them what I wanted them to do, and then they implemented it without me. So that I was able to do it from a hospital bed.
Right.
Likewise, if I didn't understand the concepts of time, So you set the time aside for yourself. So you say, I'm committing this time to do this. I'm going to learn this thing. I'm going to develop this thing. I'm going to implement this thing. Whatever the thing is you want to do, you need time. So I gave up, Julia, when I turned 20 years old. I had my daughter, and I decided to give up television because I was nursing one day, and I noticed I wasn't paying attention to my baby while I was nursing. And I thought, if it was back in the day, would I be looking at the TV or would I be looking at my baby? So I turned off the TV and I looked at my baby, and I was nursing her, and I felt, this is nice. And I said, what if I just gave up TV altogether? What would I gain? So I said, I commit to a year of no television. And I took that time and I invested it in my talents. And I started writing during that time. And I wrote all types of books. I wrote them on paper because I didn't have lots of resources. I was 20 years old and I was a single mother. Right. So I used my time in this way. And later on, when I got resources, I took the talents and the teamwork, and I took those ideas and I made them into real things like businesses, books, courses. And I gave my time, talents to the world. And in return, I've received this incredible life that I'm living now, where I employ a 27 team of people of color. We implement real things to draw down energy demands in low income, moderate income, and high income housing, businesses, and buildings across Connecticut and Massachusetts. I work in civic engagement and policy at the federal level. I'm called to Congress regularly to give, testimony. I do these incredible things, all because of this promise to myself that I would use my time and talents and tenacity wisely.
Yeah. Time, talent, teamwork. Am I missing something?
Tenacity.
Tenacity.
It's an important one. Tenacity is probably, of all of them, it may be the most important one.
Yes. And all this stuff is so juicy. I just absolutely love it. Time, talent, and just giving up your TV I'm thinking, okay, Julia, where can you find the more time? There's some more time in there I'm missing.
So time, this concept of time, right? So people are always complaining to me about how they can't get something done, right? I mentor students, young and old. I have students that are grown-ups, in their 40s, 50s. And then I have students that are 16, 17, college students. I like to work with people. I love to hear people's thoughts, and I love to delve down the rabbit hole with them when they say, like, I have this idea. And I'm like, oh, tell me, And I like to help them flush ideas out and connect them to resources to make their ideas real. I think of all the things that I do, the thing I love the most is creating, co-creating with others.
Yeah.
So for time, when you apply time concepts, and people say, moms will say to me, like, I'll go to someone's house and they're eating out, right? And they're complaining about, usually, again, all things are connected. So they're complaining that they don't have enough money. They're complaining that they're overweight, that they're not in good health, that their kids won't listen. And they're having this conversation with me, right? And I'm there and I'm like, okay, I have to behave. I'm going to say this nicely. So I say things like this. I say, well, I noticed that, we're ordering out. Have you ever considered creating a plan for your meals? So when I had cancer, when I was about 25 years old, I had cancer. And I had to figure out how to manage my 2 children and my life and cancer. So I came up with this plan. And I said, well, I'm going to prep all my food on Saturday. I'm going to shop on Saturday. I'm going to prep all my food for the week. I'm going to make a meal plan with all healthy meals. So if I cook a chicken, Julia, I bake a chicken on Saturday. That chicken is going to be Saturday dinner. It's going to be with rice. It's going to be with a salad. It's going to have some gravy. And that's my dinner. But the next day, that chicken's going to be I hate leftovers. So that chicken's going to become a chicken pot pie. Okay. So now those potatoes that were roasted under the chicken are going with that gravy from yesterday's meal, and they're becoming a pot pie with, peas and carrots and potatoes and chicken and, a fresh crust. Now it's exciting the next day, right? And then there's some over. Now I'm having chicken tacos the next day.
Yes.
So I like to take something and turn it into many things. Same with my work, right? And then what happens is you've saved time. Because I baked that chicken Saturday, but I had that chicken Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So I didn't have to make another chicken, and I didn't waste any food, and I saved a ton of money also. So when I had the rice on the chicken on Saturday, on Tuesday, that rice became part of the taco. Now it's a burrito, and there's chicken and rice and beans, and it's all going together, but in a different way, so it's not boring. So these are the things I came up with to manage my life. The other thing is that when you give up screen time, you have a double savings. You're saving on your energy bill. You're saving on your wasted brain cells. You're utilizing that time for yourself to increase your knowledge, wealth, or even just do something enjoyable, like rest outside or garden or go for a walk or think or express yourself with a friend or loved one in a real, tangible way, not virtually, but for real.
Right.
A real experience. Life is meant to be lived in real life, in real time, not vicariously.
Right.
And so you regain that time, and you regain that love for yourself, for your community, for your family. You're less stressed out also, by the way, because you're not procrastinating. So
yes,
I'm always ahead. So like when I get up in the morning at about 5 a.m., I get up and I'm making breakfast for my kids at the same time. I've thrown a load of laundry in, and I might be listening to a podcast. So I'm, chefing it up and listening to someone I really love and learning at the same time. And I'm getting good ideas, Then I do some praying and I do some journaling and I do some goal setting before my day starts.
Yeah.
And, when I move into my phase 2 of getting my day going, and then my staff start to arrive, you know what I mean? And then I'm in my work brain and I start to work on problems. And I always have a notebook there so that as I'm working on one thing and my brain comes up with a stellar idea, I jot it down because I'm going to go back to it at about 11 o'clock at night when everyone's sleeping. I pull out my notes and I start thinking about other ideas. So that's like, I've structured my life in a way that allows for flexibility so that I can be passionate about what I want, but still be responsible. Because I really believe in responsibility. I believe in fiscal responsibility. I believe in responsibility as a mother, as a community member, as a leader. And I believe in integrity very deeply and in keeping your word. So in order to keep your word, you've got to have some structure, because you can't keep your word if you don't have structure, right?
Right.
So I planned for you. You asked me a long time ago to do this interview. Well, in the back of my mind, while I'm doing other things, I'm thinking about Julia Jack, and I'm thinking like, this is coming up and I need to be prepared. So I schedule myself for, 2 days before to look at the questions. And then this morning I scheduled in a half an hour to review them so that I'm ready to be present in the moment with you.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
To be paying attention to you and your audience, and to be present with you. And likewise, later on, when I meet with a student, I will be present with them in their moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love that.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. Or else you're in this moment thinking about the next one because you're not ready for it. Yeah,
yes. And then you don't do anything right. Everything falls apart. So ultimately what I see is a lot of really frazzled Americans, mothers, fathers, grandmothers, everyone. And it's because we're living this false reality whereby we think that our screens should dictate our lives. And I look at the smartphone idea, for example, like who wants a smartphone? I want smart kids, not smartphones. I want smart friends, not smartphones.
Me too. Yeah.
So I have a rule at my house. My rule is that when you come, you have to leave your phone at the door.
Really?
So
visitors, not just family?
Oh, yeah. So I say, hi, welcome. Hey, welcome. Could you silence your phone or put it away? Because I'd like to I'm taking time and I'm talent as a resource, and I'm sitting with you, right? I could be doing something else. And my expectation is that you should do the same. So I say, put your thing aside and let's engage in this moment together. And then at the end, you'll have plenty of time to look at your phone. And sometimes people want to take pictures. That's the hardest part, because if you come to my place, it's an immersion experience. There's a wetland park, there's zip lines, there's tree houses, there's butterfly gardens, there's a art barn with 2 floors of, hands-on activities. It's an immersion experience. So people they immediately go like, oh, I want to video this. Oh, I want to take a picture. So I say, let's go be doing this thing without that. And at the end, you can do whatever you want. When our experience is over, if you want to go back and recreate that on photo, on film, but I want to engage in it right now with you.
Yeah.
And you need 2 hands. You can't go on a zip line. You can't create art.
Right.
And I say, and I want you fully present in this moment so we can spark your warrior way. And you can't spark it through that lens.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So that's what we're suffering with, is this need to video and document every second of our lives and then share it every second of our lives. And what happens is we're not actually experiencing it.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. You've got a nice picture of it, but you
didn't experience it. Like the graduations, I see parents at graduations and they're looking through their little lens instead of looking at their kid. Yeah. And then they're trying to post it right there instead of having dinner. Like you're at dinner and they're trying to take a picture of the dinner, and this isn't a good enough picture. And let's take another picture. And they're trying to post the picture, and then they're trying to reconnect the internet. And suddenly dinner's over.
Yeah.
And you've missed the joy of that moment, that real tangible life moment, instead of creating a fake moment, just enjoy the real moment.
Yes. Yeah. And relive it in your own head and verbally with each other when you get back together.
The reminiscence of that. So think of your childhood, Julia.
Yes.
Like I think of my childhood, and when I tell my kids stories and I say, you know, this one time we climbed up to the top of this train trestle and we jumped into the river. And my kids are like, what? Like, who was there? Like, nobody. Our parents were working. Like, there was no phones. Nobody was tracking where we were.
Yeah.
We weren't taking no pictures.
Videos.
There was no evidence. He just jumped off that train trestle, Julia. Like, and I think about even like nature. Like when I was a kid, like, you know, I would go outside for hours by myself. Nobody knew where I was or what I was doing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I was just experiencing life.
Yeah.
And it's given me this passion for life. And I look at these kids today and I look at these 20-year-olds and even 30-year-olds, even 40-year-olds, my friends. Yeah. They're at my home and they're lost in their phone and they're just looking at past things or looking at things that other people did and they're wishing that they were doing those things. And I'm like, well, then let's shut that phone off and go do those things.
Yeah.
Let's open up our computer right now. Let's log in. Let's create a plan to go to that cave. Let's go next weekend and let's go cave exploring in that exact cave. Let's go see what it's actually like.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and I realized this was a real thing when I saw a book in the library teaching parents how to get their kids to like being outside in nature.
It's heartbreaking.
I said, what is happening?
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
They don't want to do it. Even like kids come, you know, what's funny is parents will say to me, oh, I don't know if my kid will be okay for your camp. You know, all they do is play video games. I say, leave the kid here one day with me. And they come back and the parents, sometimes they cry. Parents are like, yes, Leticia, you have no idea. My kid is telling me about the interconnectedness of water to energy, to life, to cellular exposure. Like they're 7. And I'm like, yeah, they're smart. They're really bright. They are. You just didn't know it because we have this false reality whereby we're in a restaurant. We're sitting, it's going to be 5 minutes before we see a restaurant person. Mm-hmm. And we automatically hand this child a phone or a tablet. And what does a child do? They go into that tablet and they turn off, right? Are they paying attention to how you got to the restaurant? No. They're looking at their tablet on the where. Do they know how to get anywhere? No. They don't know any self-direction. They have no sense of direction. You get there, they don't know what they want to eat because all they're doing is worrying about getting back on that tablet. So they're like, get me whatever. And everybody's whining and crying in the restaurant. Yeah. They want to watch a video. They want to do a game.
Yep.
They're snippy with their parents. And I do this thing where I don't allow that. They have to leave their stuff in the car. My rule is we carry a bag. It's called a switch it off bag. In the bag, there's notebooks, there's crayons, there's pencils, there's markers, there's dominoes, and there is a hacky sack and a Frisbee. And they can put books in there if they want. Like if they want to bring a different book than what I've chosen. And what we do is when we sit down at the table, they can either talk to one another or they can take something out of the switch it off kit and get busy. You don't know how many people in restaurants walk up to me and say, what are your children doing? I say writing, reading, and drawing.
Yeah.
Why? Like, that's what we do. This is the warrior way.
Did somebody actually ask you that?
Yes, 100%. Yep. Maggie McFly's 2 weeks ago, we're sitting there, my granddaughter and I, and they said, I've never seen a child so well behaved. She's 6. And I was with my other kid, she's 12, and I had a 14-year-old with me. And they said, boy, your children are talking and they're interacting and they're laughing. I said, yeah. Do you know why? And the mom was there with her kids and they all had tablets at the table. And I said, turn off the tablets and they'll look at you and talk to you.
Yeah.
So then she says, well, they're going to have a fit.
Yep.
This is true. They might have a fit. You know what you say? No. My answer is no.
Yeah.
How about that? No, you can't have that until you've done this. So what I say to my kids is, how about we do something else for an hour? We'll set a timer. And when the timer goes off, if you still want to use the tablet, then you can use the tablet for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It's
like everything else. It's like everything else in our lives. There's boundaries to everything. There's a time limit to everything. I mean, you don't take a shower for 7 hours. You know,
right.
I might like the hot water, but
or you could call it balance, right? Like
balance.
Ultimately, what you're doing is switching off the electronics to turn on and empower your most important tool, which is living between your ears. It's your brain.
Yes.
If you want to empower yourself, your community, your family, turn off those things, use those things as tools. So if I want to draw a brain.
Yeah. I'll look at that. Yeah.
I look at a picture of a brain.
Yep.
I might print it out so I'm not tempted to continue looking at things down the rabbit hole. So I print out the brain, or I snap a picture on the phone and I hold it on the phone so I'm not on the internet. And I show it to the kids and I say, this is the brain. We're going to draw this brain.
Yeah.
And then I say, we're going to use Sharpies, and then we're going to spray alcohol on it, and we're going to watch diffusion. It's going to go from the place of deep areas to areas where there's less. And then I say, where else does that happen? Give me an example of where else does that happen? And they'll say, we'll look at a cup of water and we'll drop food coloring in, and we'll say, oh, it's most concentrated and now it's going to the point of least concentration. Then we'll do it with something else, like a piece of paper or a piece of fabric. And then we'll say, well, do you think that applies to air, to rivers, to oceans? And then once you start sparking this concept of thinking, thinking deeply, or reading more sets of information, not one article by one person, but 5 articles by 5 people with different perspectives, right? Yeah. Then we'll say, well, how do those ideas compare and contrast? Remember that, Julia, when we went to school and teachers talked about comparing and contrasting ideas? And they said, one might be right, the other might be, it might be something in the middle. Maybe it's not right or left. Maybe it's in the middle. Maybe it's not red or blue. Maybe it's red, white, and blue. Maybe concepts are interconnected, and it's us humans who segment things.
Absolutely.
And chunk them up and silo ideas. And then when we silo things, what happens, Julia? They're separate.
Yep.
And then we don't feel like we're connected any longer. Yeah. And there's this false reality and fear that fills those gaps. Fear and hate fill those gaps because the lack of compassion, which comes from understanding someone else. You have compassion when you understand.
Yes. Yeah. And understanding doesn't always mean agree.
No, you don't have to agree. Exactly. You just have to see it from another perspective. So sometimes I tell kids, we're looking at something this way, like landscape. Yeah. And I'll say, let's try it this way. Or let's try it this way. Yeah. And when you fold it and turn it, suddenly that same concept can fit somewhere else. Yeah. Right? Maybe we'll trim a little edge off this piece of wood and it will fit here. Maybe the same thing with our ideas, Julia. Like if we think about energy, for example, and people don't want to use coal. Coal's the evil thing, right? Now coal's evil. Yeah. Then oil was evil. Then gas. Now natural gas is evil, right? But guess what, Julia? Guess where electricity comes from? Coal, oil, and natural gas. Yeah, so why are we electrifying everything? What we should be doing is drawing down demand, doing less with more. And ramping up resources that are renewable, like solar, wind, and hydroelectric. Yeah. And people say, oh, well, I don't want that in my backyard. Okay, fine. Let's not build it in your backyard. There's lots of places like parking lots, like unused spaces, like brownfields, like off the highway ramps. Like it doesn't have to be one or the other. Right. It could be a compilation of diverse ideas coming together for a diverse outcome that benefits all people. Yeah. Not some people. Yeah. Yeah. Literally all people. Even those who might not be active in it benefit. Even those who don't know. Yeah. Yes. Even those who are still unaware and left in the dark, quite literally. Right? Yes. Yes. So I want to ask you about the warrior way. Can you explain that to us? I'd love to hear what that is. Sure. So the warrior way is a concept that I came up with in honor really of my father. My father and my grandfather, I should say, because really it was, a shared kind of thing that my grandfather and my father kind of taught me these concepts that are really this basis I'm explaining to you about interconnectedness. Right. And in the warrior way, we teach people all these concepts that I'm kind of reviewing. So warriors pledge to learn all that they can, to use their powers for the good of the planet and the people, to share what they know and work to inspire positive change. This is the warrior way.
Nice.
We work with all people to create things and do activities that engage people in doing instead of viewing. We call this switch it off. Warriors learn to switch things off that are distracting to allow them to strengthen their superpowers. We look to directly engage in the world and enjoy it while we protect and defend it. This is the warrior way. We think it, plan it, say it, and then we do it. This is how we change the world, one mind, one person, one thing at a time, until our work is how we want it to be. All warriors pledge to use their senses and powers to create and promote positive growth and empower others around us as we go. We talk about the power of change, we take a pledge, and we work together because superpowers are hidden deep inside of us. And we work to find and foster the powers and protect and change the world together and collectively. Powers might be things like dance, poetry, singing, reading, writing, math. Humor could be a power, storytelling, planning, doing. Sometimes the powers are so hidden that people think they don't have a power.
Yes.
But they do, Julia.
Yes, they do.
Yes. Yeah. And our goal is to find that power, help them identify their superpower, and then work to ensure they share their power and inspire powers in others.
Yeah. Now I see how this can be sparked in a young person easier. How about the older individual? Do they gravitate to it? Do they grab onto it? Do they get it? Do they dismiss you? I'm wondering how they react to this warrior way.
Interestingly, warriors believe that all things are possible when we work together. So we never discount even the naysayers. So what I find is this is the tenacity, right? The T for tenacity, the T for time, and the team for talent and teamwork all fall into that. Because let's say, Julia, you have a different perspective than me, and you grew up with lots of wealth, for example, and you believe that people who are poor are just lazy. And so I might be at odds with you on that belief. So that can be difficult for me and you to have a conversation and engage. So that's why teamwork comes into play. Because teamwork means I've got someone on my team who has something about them that you can engage with. Inevitably, there's someone I know who will be able to connect with you. And that person can then have that conversation with you in a way that is comfortable for you and explore your time, talent, teamwork, and tenacity. And what I find is that over time, people do change and they can hear the things that they couldn't hear before. And the other way we engage adults often is through their children. So sometimes their children have an interest in these concepts, and then the child takes the learning tool home, and the child then educates the parent and brings them to the table for that deeper conversation.
Yeah, nice. Wow, that's amazing. I am inspired.
If you are enjoying the F50 Woman podcast, don't forget to share your positive comments and ratings and share us on all your favorite social media channels. F50 Woman is a movement created for women, spread by women. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show and your host, Julia Jack.
It's like your life is your passion and your purpose is your life. It feels like you've gotten to a point where it's all sort of gelled and you understand the direction you're walking in and why. And I love that about you.
I love it too. I have to say, people will say to me, I have older children who are adults, right? So I don't know, you have adult children too, I think. And
yes,
adult children are really interesting because they're adults. So they feel empowered to say what they think, right? They're grown ups. They live in their own houses. They have their own cars. They have their own significant others. Adults are not afraid to tell their parents something. So what I'm always interested in with my children who saw me grow, my first child, I was 19. So he kind of grew up alongside me. Right. So he's 25 now. And it's really cool to see him reflect back at me. Like we were somewhere recently in a car driving. He's nothing like me, my oldest child. He's very different, but he's very artistic still. He has that artistic flair. Yeah. And he grew up in my younger years where I would say I was much more rough around the edges and maybe a bit ghettified. Okay. I was very physically aggressive and just very different. And in my younger years, I would get into a street fight, for example, whereas now I would more likely probably just tell you off. So he got to see that side of me. And now he says to me, we were in the car and I was talking about this farm I'm opening up where we're going to teach the warrior way at this farm, an immersion experience for people. And he said to me, Mom, you have thousands of ideas a day. How do you decide which ones to pick and follow?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what an interesting question. I never knew he thought about things like that.
He goes,
yeah. He goes, I just can't imagine. How do you get up every day and be just as passionate? Like, how is it every day, no matter whether you had cancer, no matter someone did something bad to you, how do you keep going? And I had to think about it because I was driving,
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Miles, what a great question. I think it's the warrior way. I think the thing that my father and my grandfather did for me was lay that foundation of bad things happen to everyone. Yeah. So don't cry over spilt milk. Yeah. Just get up and move forward. Put one foot in front of the other. All journeys start with the first step. Yeah. Just decide to take a step. And if you make a mistake and you disagree with the path you've chosen, turn around and do something else.
Yep. Take a left or a right. Yeah.
Yeah. So my dad would say, when I was doing something bad as a child and I would be trying to rebuttal, defend myself, and he would say, Leticia, when you're in a hole, the first thing you have to do is stop digging. Don't keep digging.
Nice. Yes.
He'd say, if you're in a hole, what's the first thing you have to do? And I'd say, get a rope, pull myself out. He'd say, no, stop digging, you fool. Oh. Yeah.
Yeah. The most of us will think, climb out of it. But yeah.
My response was climb out, Dad. And he'd say, no, stop digging, you fool. So this is the thing is like, as people, we often continue the same behaviors. We try to continue the same behaviors, expecting a different result. Right, yes. Julia? We say, yes. I want to own a restaurant, for example. Yeah. And my way of getting to that goal is I'm going to watch Food Network for 10 years. Well, yes. This is real, Julia. Yeah. And I say, well, yeah, now you've learned how to watch people cook food. Good job. Mm-hmm. But what are the steps to owning a restaurant? Let's write those steps down. The first step is creating an idea, writing it down. Do you need a license to cook food? Do you need to get a food certificate? Do you need a building? Do you need ingredients? Do you need servers? What is that going to cost you? How are you going to get that money? So when you start to go down that path and you write it down, then the next thing is to say it. You connect with others and you go meet people who own restaurants, or you talk to people who are chefs. You learn about the potential bumps and bruises, and then you take that actionable step to start implementing your plan. Yeah. Right? And you start to build the plan into a reality. And then there's going to be bumps and bruises, and that's okay. Yes. That's good. That's a learning. That's part of learning. Science would tell us that Einstein did not create the light bulb on day one. Right. There were multiple tries and things that people would have called failures. Yes. But I don't see those as failures. I see those as stepping stones to your success. Yep. Right? Yep. My first company, I was 20 years old. I tried to start a soap company. I wanted to sell soap. For whatever reason, this was an idea. I started making soaps at home. And I was selling the soaps. And I actually did make a little bit of money. But it wasn't enough to even cover my cost. And I realized that I wasn't actually going to become like a soap guru. Yeah. People were ahead of me on the soap game. Then I started writing books. And again, I failed. I wrote several books and I failed. I couldn't get people to publish me. I couldn't get my books out the door. Yeah. I didn't know how to do it properly. I illustrated my own books. I wrote my own books. I edited my own books. And when no one would publish me, Julia, I decided to explore, what did it take to publish a book? So I started a publishing company and I called it Great Books for Kids. And then I started writing book after book after book, but I couldn't get to market. And then 5 years later, I had all these books. I met my husband and he was good at graphic design. And I said, do you think you can help me lay these things into real books? Yeah. And I had cancer, so I had a little time on my hands. I was in a hospital bed. So I had some time to work with my computer. And I, started really developing these content. And then I published my first book. Okay. Yeah. And I sent it to someone whom I knew. And I said, will you read this and tell me what you think? And they sent me back this letter that was so mean. It was this is the dumbest book I have ever read. It was the worst idea. I don't know why on earth you spent your money to
Oh my
publish
gosh,
this book.
I wasn't expecting that.
It was the worst book I've ever read in my life, Leticia. It's the dumbest thing. You should not go forward with this idea. It's so stupid. And I still have the letter.
Seriously.
I have the letter. So like for months, I kept reading this letter that this man wrote me.
Yeah.
And
I feel the warrior way coming on.
I was reading this letter. And so then this is how the universe, this is universal law. Mm-hmm. Someone gave me the book, Chicken Soup for the Soul. Some random person at work. I worked at Hartford Hospital. Right. They gave me this book and I started reading the book. And on the back of the book, it says, Chicken Soup for the Soul is a self-published book and has sold millions of copies as a #1 seller. So then I Googled #1 sellers that were self-published. Harry Potter, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Power of Now by Tony like all of these famous books. People told them, go kick rocks. We don't want to publish your book. Mm-hmm. Then I thought, wait a minute. I'm not going to listen to this man. I'm going to do what I want. That's the warrior way. Yeah. And I moved forward. Now, that book was never a big seller. I got to be honest with you. It was Butterfly Rhythm, and it's never been my #1 seller. Neither was Busy Bee, which was my second book. Neither was Hip Hoppy La Parade, which was my third book. Right. But guess what? My fourth book, Dinero the Frog Learns to Save Energy, has sold hundreds of thousands of copies worldwide. Woo! Pesky Plastic, which is the story of interconnectedness of how water and plastic are very, sadly interconnected. Mm-hmm. That book is an international bestseller. It's in public school content. It's lifted people in Guatemala, Ecuador, South America, Hawaii. I was on National Geographic on Earth Day, talking about my book alongside one of my heroes, this man in Hawaii who created the movie Message in the Waves with BBC and NPR. Like I got to be with my heroes on Earth Day on a live television cast for National Geographic because of this book that if I had listened to that man would have never been a thing.
Right. Yeah.
Tenacity.
Yes.
Time.
That's tenacity.
Talent. Yep. Teamwork. Because why? I involved my husband. At the time, I had a roommate who was living with me in my very small 2-bedroom house because I couldn't afford it on my own. So a roommate from Hartford Hospital, Travis Kimball, helped me write some of my books. When I would get writer's block, I'd say, I'm stuck on this line. I don't know what to do. And we'd brainstorm together, and and like, again, it's all human interaction, right? If I had just been alone with my headphones at my computer and never engaged with others or not had trust to reach others, I would have never filled that gap with those ideas. I would have never been inspired by Travis's ideas or my husband's ideas, or even my children give me ideas.
Yeah. Yes. And we have to remember that we are our best resource, not necessarily Google. We're not knocking Google because you find some great things on there, but connecting with one another and getting real life, human, flesh and blood input ideas. And like you said, being trusting.
Engaging directly with the world around you. This is the warrior way. You must engage, turn it off and look up at the blessings that are in front of us every moment of every day. And if you see something you don't like, that's okay. Just acknowledge that thing you don't like. Acknowledge it internally that you don't like it. It doesn't have to be a story for everyone to know either. That's the other thing is like, stop putting your stuff out there on social media.
Everything. Yes.
We don't want to know. Like to TMI, folks. Like if you are having a fight with your husband, I do not need to know that.
Yes.
I don't need to know that.
Yeah.
I don't want to know
you said,
everything.
Call me up on the phone and say, I need some help and we can talk about it, but we don't need everybody doesn't need to read.
Person to person. Like, are you really going to get the advice you need from random strangers?
No.
Are they going to empower you, Julia?
Most of the time, no.
No. And if you want to know why those trolls are bothering you, it's because you're putting every single complaint out there and you're getting back what you're putting out.
Yeah. We gotta try to work. I don't know if it's work against, but we need to go a different direction.
We need to make change, which is also a warrior way. Create the change you desire to see in the world. Look at you, Julia. You were empowered and inspired to talk to people.
Yeah.
Now you've interviewed all of these amazing people and you're inspired, but also what are you doing? It's a catalyst. It's a spark for others to be inspired, right?
Yes.
You're
Yes.
sharing what you know. Julia, that is the wire way.
I love
sharing
it.
what you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if anyone else out there is thinking it or if you've heard people think it, but oftentimes when you feel like you want to do these type of things, your book or this podcast, sometimes you're like, nobody wants to hear that. Nobody's going to listen to that. It's not going to help anyone because you have this concept that, I don't know, I'm not CEO of anything or, I don't have that degree. So what am I?
You know what that is, Julia?
I'm not a broadcaster. Yeah.
Do you know
what is that?
That's your BS.
No.
That's your belief system.
Oh, yes. BS. Yes.
That's your BS lens. That's your BS in your head talking to you. Do you know where your BS comes from? The compilation of every experience you've ever had where someone said, you are not good enough. Leticia, you need a bachelor's degree to do that. You can't play that game, Leticia. You're not allowed to speak at Yale, Leticia. You can't create that program, Leticia. You're not a bachelor's degree. You don't have a master's in education, Leticia. What do you know about educating children? Yeah. Guess what? I know a lot about that.
Right.
And if I had listened to those people who told me that I could not because I did not, because they said, all of that is their personal BS. I'm not taking your BS with me. Leave your BS at home.
Yeah. Yeah. That's everybody remember. Let their BS be left at home. I
when you hear that voice that says to you,
yeah.
Julia or Leticia, you cannot do that thing. Your response to that voice should be, no, you can't do that thing. I'm about to go do it right now.
That's right.
Watch me now.
Yeah. Watch me.
Watch me now.
You just sit right there and watch me. Yeah.
Stay right there. Be comfortable. Watch me do it now.
That's right. Yeah. Turn the show on. I want to be respectful of your time. So I have a couple of more questions. One is, I am dying to know, because it sounds like as you were growing up, you don't have a lot of regret, which I think is great. But I'm wondering if, looking back, if you were to meet yourself as a younger woman, what would the one piece of advice you would give her?
I think if I was to meet myself as a younger person, the bit of advice that I would give myself is the advice I just gave you.
Okay.
That leave that BS behind. That don't allow others to define you. Don't allow others to define your problems. Because when you allow others to define your problems, you're allowing them to define the potential solutions.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Don't allow people to put myself in a box. The regret I have is that I didn't ever graduate college. To this day, Julia, I desire a college degree.
Okay.
I wish I wanted to be a doctor. I always wanted to be Dr. Colon de Mejias. I still do. Life ain't over and the fat lady hasn't sung. So one day maybe I will be Dr. Colon de Mejias.
Yeah.
I believe I'm smart enough to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that for me, it became kind of a hang up because I got pregnant very young.
Mm-hmm.
And I dropped out of school due to a pregnancy. And then I never found the time because I was always giving to others. I was always giving to my children, giving to the community, helping other people go to college, helping other people study, watching my friends' kids so that they could enroll in programs, having other children. I adopted children and I raised foster kids. So I was always busy doing.
Yeah.
And I really regret not having that paper for myself, not for others to validate me.
Right.
But for me to feel validated for me.
Okay.
But I also kind of sometimes feel like that's my BS. So that's why I don't drop everything to rush and, to go. Also, it's expensive. Right. If college was free, I would do it right now. If Yale said, Leticia, come be a college student for free, I'd drop everything right now and go be a student at Yale. That's my dream.
Do it. Yeah.
That's my dream. I'd love to be a Yaley. I talk a lot about Yaleys. If you ever you'll hear me in the news or whatever, I always refer to the Yaleys. I sound like a hater-rater. It's just hate. I'm just jealous.
Okay.
Of those Yaleys.
We'll be looking forward to that. Yeah. When you have when things are, or when the sea parts and you've got that chunk of time or whatever happens or scholarship or grant or something.
Somebody's got to give me a scholarship or a grant. I 100% want to be Dr. Colon de Mejias.
Yes.
So that is my regret. That's my regret.
Yeah.
Other than that, I have very few regrets. I mean, obviously there's times in life where I could have been kinder. I always look back at my life and say, could I have made a kinder choice there? Could I have been different with that person interaction? I am aggressive. I have an assertive tendency.
Yeah.
I don't tolerate nonsense.
Right.
I'm very much Veruca in that way. Like, I want it now.
Okay. Yeah.
I want it now.
And you see it. And I think that's what balances it and allows you to use it for your benefit and for the benefit of others.
Don't care how I want it now. Very,
yes.
very Veruca.
Yes.
In that way, but not spoiled. I was never spoiled. I did earn everything that I have. And that is the balance. That's the balance, right? Is when you have to bootstrap it and earn what you have, it does give you a sense of gratitude.
Yeah. It's very true.
The other thing is I've been very sick my entire life. I have an autoimmune disorder that I was born with and was unaware of until adulthood. And I spent a lot of my childhood in the hospital, and in and out of medical facilities. And I had my jaw broken when I was a young child, and I had to have reconstructive facial surgery because of it. My jaw was broken and my face was messed up. And that took years of surgeries to reconstruct my jaw and the mechanisms that work your mouth. Funny enough, because talking, I think, is my best superpower. But I spent 12 weeks with my mouth wired shut. And that experience changed me. That inability to express myself verbally forced me to become a writer.
Wow.
And I think that writing, unlike podcasting, I think that written word is a special thing. If you look at like the Bible or, I think of Leif Erikson or other writers that have inspired me, Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist, some pieces of literature, they just change you and open your mind. They're literally mind opening.
They are. Yes.
So I think that writing is a gift for people, and it's a gift for other people. It's not just for the writer. Like, it outlives you. Yeah. It's beyond you. It's not something you own. It's something that the world owns, even when you're gone. I think that if I could change something, I would have started writing earlier, and I would have, there's some books I've written that I haven't gone to print with that are for adults. Like, I'm writing this book called The Keys, which is all about how I got to be this way and how I became successful and how I've leveraged that to leverage others to success. Like, I've helped other people that are minorities and they own businesses just like mine.
I can't wait for this book. When is that coming out? Is it soon or
I wish it was, but it's a work in progress. Yeah. Okay. I need an editor. Anyone listening who wants to help me write a book that's going to be a bestseller, like,
it will be. Me. Yes.
Yeah.
There are a lot of golden nuggets in there. And like you said, it's going to outlive you. And there are things that we just can't figure out on our own without a lifetime.
Yeah. And I was also raised by my mother, like, had a master's degree in education, but my stepfather was a heroin addict. So I grew up in a really strange way where my dad was like a firewalking instructor and my stepmother was a social worker. Yeah. She was Cuban. Her parents were right from Cuba, like off the boat. So they had like wicked strong personalities, really incredible people. Like they were warrior ways too. Mm-hmm. And my grandparents on my mother's side were Italian and they were from Italy and they were like super like hands on everything, no excuses, you know. And then my dad is a firewalker, so you've got like that mixed in. So this compilation of personalities, and even my stepfather, who was a heroin addict, actively an alcoholic my entire life, he even played into the goodness of me because you can learn what not to do. Yes. And I value that, but I also value the good parts of him. There were parts of that man that were really beautiful and that spent time with me reading. He was a reader and he loved to read books like novels. Yeah. And he would allow me to read his books. He would share the books. And so I read things like Swan Song, novels that were adult novels. When I was like in the third grade, I was reading like Stephen King and Peter Straub. And this type of writing really puts your mind afire. It makes you think outside of your local community. It makes you think about, like, they would go to Spain in the book and they would be in France in the book and they'd be in Egypt. And then I'd be thinking, like, what are those places like? Living through novels. Yeah.
And also the two more questions, but I just wanted to make this point and see if that's your experience. What I'm learning from hearing other people's stories who've had parents who had substance problems or family members, gambling or whatever it is, sometimes we think those people are just, useless. They didn't do anything for me, but give me a hard time. And through their hard time they gave me, then I got better. But I found that that's not the case. These are human beings who love you, who have talents and gifts, and they share what they can. Some of us are all in, even those parents like me who think they're well adjusted. I probably messed my kids up a little bit here and there, but they really have given things that they're like, I couldn't have done it without them. But when you first hear, oh, she was an addict, you're thinking, oh, she didn't really do anything for you. But then you hear the story and like, they did. So I don't know. That's an awareness for me. Even in my family, these people are valuable. Everybody has something.
Everybody has a purpose. I'm going to tell you something on that. So I was in DC about 5 years ago at the Capitol. I was at a hearing and we were walking with a group of lobbyists and legislators, congressional leaders to Rayburn Building. Yeah. And there was homeless people everywhere in DC. There's homeless people everywhere.
Yes. Yeah.
And we're walking and there's this man and he's sitting there on his little cart and he was selling books. And it was his own story. He wrote a book about himself and his life as a homeless man. Wow. And I walked over to him and he was selling the books for $10 a copy. And I had $100 in my wallet. I walked over and I said, I have $100. I'd like as many books as I can buy. And the people that were walking with me refused to stop. They were like, don't give money to homeless people. I said, well, first of all, I don't give money to homeless people. Yeah. This man is selling something. Yeah. And I'd like to support the fact that he's doing something amazing. Yeah. And I ended up having like a 20-minute conversation with this man who, by the way, was brilliant. Yeah. I bought all these books and then I donated them to the library and I kept one for my daughter who was doing a study on homelessness.
Okay.
So my ex-husband is homeless. So she was really interested in the concept of homelessness because her father willingly chose to live a life as a homeless person.
Okay.
So we're reading this book and it's all about why this man is homeless. And I'm thinking to myself, this guy has so much to offer. How many people have we not interacted with that were this man in some other form?
Yes.
The woman who illustrated the best-selling book that I have, Janelle Frog Learns to Save Energy. When I met her, she was homeless. She came to my home looking to draw a picture and make money. She was trying to sell me art. And I didn't have an interest in that. But I did have an interest in art lessons for my kids. So I invited her in, gave her a cup of tea and said, would you teach my children art? Each week I'll pay you whatever you want. You tell me how much and I'll pay you to teach them how to make this art you make. And for a year, she came to my home and helped my children make art. And then she illustrated my book. At the time, she said, there's no way I could illustrate a book, Leticia. I've never illustrated anything. I don't know how to do that. It's not possible. It took me about 6 months to convince her that it was possible. And like I said, it's the best-selling book I have. She's also illustrated lots of other books since then for me. And now she lives in Korea teaching English at a school.
Wow.
That was her life's dream. I said, what is your life's dream? And then we worked for 3 years to get her there. So it took time, took talent, it took tenacity, and it took teamwork, but she got her dream and I got mine. So trading, right? Also, we should add trading because that's a T. Talking is one. We could have lots of T's. Think about this, right? So, but the point is that anything is possible and all these people had skills. The man who illustrates my comic books was a homeless man when I met him. He was living under the bridge near Hartford Hospital. He walked up to me and asked me for money. I said, I do not give people money, but do you have any skills or superpowers? He said, I'm an artist. I said, what kind? He said, I like to draw. I said, could you draw me something tomorrow? I will come and look at it. When I came back, he had drawn this incredible piece of art that I own it today. And then he starts to tell me that he used to be the comic book illustrator for Spider-Man, but then he developed a drug problem. And then he ended up living under a bridge. Now he doesn't live under a bridge. Now he's an illustrator and he lives in an apartment. He got medicated. He had a mental health issue, which was undiagnosed. He was bipolar schizophrenic. He had never been diagnosed properly. His family had abandoned him because they didn't want to deal with his self-medication. So they just left him and moved to Florida. Now this man is actively engaged in working. He has his own apartment. He mentors kids. He has become this flourishing African-American gentleman in Hartford. This couldn't have happened if I didn't take the time to acknowledge when he said, hello, I need money. I acknowledged him.
Yes.
We are all the same inside,
And
Julia.
recognize that he was just a person. Yeah, he's not a monster. Yes.
And I brought him home to my house. I asked my husband's permission. I said, do you mind if he comes over the house and takes a shower and has a meal, and we can have a discussion with him about the warrior way, and we can see whether we can potentially get him in a program to get him clean, to get him services, and to get him housing. And then my husband and I said, we'll split the cost of the housing at first until we can, you know what, sometimes someone just needs that hand.
Yes.
Not a hand out, a hand up, Julia.
Absolutely. I believe that. Yes.
Not a fish, but a fishing pole.
Yeah.
These are theories that go beyond Christianity, that are part of Muslim, that are part of Jewish belief systems. These ideals that I'm expressing are not my own. Yeah. They are interconnected concepts of humanity and decency that for some reason over the last few years as a nation and as a country and as a world, we have been ignoring that human nature is really to love, to help, and to serve. Yeah. And when you do those things, it looks like this life that I'm living, which is a blessed life full of joy, happiness, engagement, kindness, and reciprocation. Believe it or not, people give it back. Yeah. Maybe not the same person. It's not always the same person. Like it's not someone else gives it to you.
Wow. I am so totally incredibly inspired. I think I'm going to need to go back and think there's some fearlessness that's in part of the warrior way.
Yes.
Who's going to bring a homeless guy? I'm going to bring the homeless guy in my house. My kids live here. I'm going to take a shower. Those kind of things start going through your head.
Everybody acted like that when I started doing it. My family was like, what's wrong with you? Why are you taking in homeless people? Why are you letting people shower and eat your food? Why are you giving away your money? Oh, another one was this. I had a lot of legislators say to me, Leticia, you don't understand money. To which I say, I understand money. I grew up extremely poor where food was a commodity. Yeah. Where clothing came from the hand-me-down bin, and where I had one pair of shoes for the entire year. And if I grew out of them, nada te manda. That's what you get, Leticia. So I know what poverty is. And I leveraged a $25,000 0% interest credit card to create the company that now makes millions of dollars a year. Wow. And everyone that works for me, with the exception of 3 people, are people of color who came from the same experience as me. Yeah. Every one of them, Julia. Yeah. So the other 3 don't. The other 3 are people who came from normal experiences where they had 2-parent households, where they didn't have to suffer or struggle. That's okay too. We're not mad at them. Good for them. I'm not hating on those people who have everything. Good for them. Good for them. I'm happy for that because guess what? I worked with people at the hospital, like this woman, Louisa Chemelecki. She was like my counterpart at the hospital in research. She ran the IRB. She had a husband. She had good parents. Her husband had good parents. They had been married for like 60 years. They have 4 children. I one day took her to lunch and I said, how do you be like you? How can I be like you? Normal. Yeah. Because I didn't ever experience that. I never knew what it was to have 2 parents or to eat dinner at a table or none of these things I had experienced. So I said, can you tell me, I showed up with a notebook. Can you tell me what you're like at home? Yeah. And I met with her for lunch for a year. And she told me what it was like to be normal, what her husband was like, what she looked for in a husband, how her and her husband communicated, how they raised their children, how they used money, how they bought a house. And guess what? I emulated everything that woman told me. Wow.
That's a nice piece of advice. Ask the question. Take some notes.
I asked questions and took notes. And everywhere I go, Julia, I bring a notebook and I say, how did you become who you are? This man, Tom Trumbull, another incredible leader. He used to be the head of the Catholic Community College Foundation in Hartford. Incredible man. Same thing. Took me under his wing. He met me for breakfast every Friday. He would give me an hour of his time for free and mentor me. I haven't paid for airfare, Julia, in 7 years. This man taught me how to use a Southwest Black credit card for all my business expenses. I have flown for free. Yeah. And gone and stayed at hotels with my entire family. I'm a mother of 7, traveling for free. Yeah. Because this man, Tom Trumbull, taught me the basic concept of leveraging your credit, paying your credit ahead of time, paying bills weekly instead of monthly, beating compound interest, buying properties and renting them at reasonable rates to decent people. All of these things he taught me in a decent way. He shared the information that he received as a privileged white man He brought me into that circle and said, Leticia, you are smart. You can do these things and you can share these things with others. And he shares with everybody, not just me. This man is an incredible white man over 70. Like, there are good white people that are rich. There are good Black people that are rich, just like there are good poor people that are Black and white. There is Latinas that are rich and poor. All of us have something to contribute. And the Warrior Way says, identify your special skill, awaken it, and then practice your skill, hone it, and then share it and teach others how to practice it. And we can all have everything we need. There is enough for all of us, Julia.
Yes, I was hoping you'd make that point. Yes.
There's a false reality that there's not enough. There is plenty of everything. There's plenty of everything. Some people have too much. Some people have too little. But that doesn't mean I'm talking about wealth redistribution either. I'm not saying that rich people should give up what they've worked hard for.
Right.
I'm saying share what you know. Let others find the way. Let them build their own wealth, their own equity. Let them find the skill sets they need to become like you, not have what you have what they have.
Yeah. Yeah. And your success and your greatness didn't take away from his. He's still great. It's not like
he's got even more. Actually, interestingly enough, I've partnered with these people on lots of things, and it has created more wealth for them. And I have another friend, Stephen Cowell. He's at the Building Performance Institute, BPA of the United States of America Association. He's head of Eat for the Future. He's president of this foundation. He's a very wealthy man who continually, he could retire, he could travel, he could do whatever he wants. Every day, this man gets up at 5 a.m. and he works diligently to solve the problems of the world, to create clean energy economies, to educate people, to share his knowledge, wealth, to create jobs. This man, again, he's a rich white man. People would be like, oh, they have everything. These white men, they're so whatever. Sure, there's guys that are jerks. Of course there are. But guess what? There's just as many who just are not being acknowledged for their leadership capacity. Just like there's Black leaders like Senator Doug McCrory and Senator Bobby Gibson, and Spanish ones like Representative Geraldo Reyes, and Robin Porter is a Black woman. She's an incredibly powerful woman. We're not lifting these people up. Where are the news stories on these incredible, powerful people of color and white people who are doing these amazing things of building bridges, tearing down walls, and closing the gaps of disparity? We don't acknowledge their amazingness. We only want to look at the ugly stories. We want to get fascinated about, I call that, oogling over that car crash on the highway, instead of oogling over that person who pulled over to pull that burning body out of that car and save a life. Stop focusing on the uglies and start focusing on the amazing blessings that are literally everywhere you go. Just look up at the amazing and stop Googling world news.
Yes. I started again after about a year, and I was just like, I can't do it. I mean, I'll preview over it so I know what's going on, but death, murder, kill is just constant misery.
We are obsessed as a population of people with the sadness and negativity, and we keep feeding that wolf. My friend says, don't feed that wolf. Feed the goodness instead. And, feed that positive nature that you have, and expose yourself to positive people. The other thing about the Warrior Way, which you can find, by the way, in the book, Yes, Your Educational Success Workbook outlines this concept for adults. And it has segments that says, like, you're here today, but where do you want to be? And then it outlines how to get there. And it's a workbook, so you can fill in what your thoughts are and explore, what you want to be when you grow up, so to speak.
And mention the name of that again. I didn't
called Your
catch it.
Educational Success. You can find it at Barnes and Nobles, Walmart, online. Any online bookstore has it. Your Educational Success. And that is like the introduction to the keys. And it basically says, like, what do you want to be? Where do you want to be? And how can you get there? And it explains the actionable ways to develop that path forward. So I just encourage anyone listening to say to yourself, it doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter where you've been, and all those negative experiences, they do not matter. If you want to rise up, let them go. They are weights holding you down. Let them go and be free of them. And instead build yourself a set of wings and go wherever you want, girlfriend, or
Yeah.
wherever you want, boyfriend. Stop remembering all the bad things that happened to you and start building the things you desire to see.
Okay. Now, is the workbook you just mentioned, I was going to ask you about the one book you would advise women to read. Is that it, or is there another one? You mentioned quite a few, and that I'm going to take note of throughout our podcast. But is there one that you'll say, if you don't read anything else, of course your books, but if you don't read anything else, what would that be?
I mean, I don't know. It depends on where they are, right?
Okay.
If you're being abused, if you're listening and you're being abused, or in an abusive relationship or a stagnant relationship where you may be harmed emotionally or physically, I would suggest Women Who Love Too Much.
Okay.
That book reframed. I grew up in an abusive household, so I was in an abusive relationship.
Okay.
And I emulated that behavior when I was younger. That book really helped me reframe abuse, that I didn't deserve it and that it wasn't appropriate, and what I could do differently to seek love that was appropriate.
Yeah.
The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho opened my mind to the fact that the things I desired might already be in my wheelhouse, that I might already have them, and I might be seeking something in my mind that isn't real, like seeking a trip to Egypt, for example, when in reality I could have seen a desert here in the United States, or, just for example.
Right.
So Paulo Coelho's book, I really loved that, and The Alchemist. And then there's another book by Deepak Chopra called The Way of the Wizard.
Okay.
And that book, it's self-reflective, and it teaches you specific skills. And I also really like the book, Conversations with God.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good
So
one.
those are the ones that come to mind right away. If you're struggling with a abuse problem of self-abuse, so you're self-medicating and you might be using alcohol too frequently or drugs too frequently, I like the NA book. They call it the Big Book. And the Big Book is the 12 steps. It's the program that helps you release yourself from being held hostage by your BS, your belief system, which is causing you to self-abuse.
Okay.
Like I said, I grew up in a family with a lot of interconnectedness to, inebriation, self-medication, and mental health disorders. And I myself freed myself of that disorder at age 27. I gave up all substances. As an adult mother of two, I realized that I was not making good choices as a parent, and I would never reach my highest potential if I did not give up self-abuse. And so I did,
Nice.
maybe another podcast, but I
know I was going to say that you threw that right on the table, but I know that's a whole story because, just trying to stop drinking coffee or eating too much are big things. So,
and they're all the same, by the way, giving up anything. Also, the Warrior Way teaches that concept as well. The Warrior Way teaches how self-love, or I call it the fifth element. The fifth element I call self-love,
Okay.
And I say that, applying self-love liberally takes training. You have to learn it. If you were not taught how to be kind to yourself, how to love yourself, if you were not taught that you are worthy, then you have to teach yourself to be worthy, and that you have to honor yourself as a human. And there's so many people that their struggle really is just, in simple terms, that they've never been taught to love themselves, to value themselves, and to honor themselves. And the Warrior Way teaches children to honor themselves, and it teaches why we honor ourselves and how we honor ourselves.
And how, that's amazing. So please tell us and the audience how we can get in touch with you after this podcast is over. How can they connect with you? If they have questions, how can they reach you? What's the best way?
So currently I'm pretty booked solid on contacts, and I'm mentoring tons of people. That said, a lot of my material is available. I try to make things available, like for free. So like online, you can Google Leticia Colon de Mejias, and you're going to find videos that I have out there that they can look and learn about, for example, like infrastructure for America or clean energy transition. Nice. I also have material for youth on Green Eco Warriors. It's GEW portal.org. Okay. On that portal, there's a lot of online books where I'm actually reading. So if your kid is not ready to read yet, you can go on Storytime with Leticia and click that button, and it will bring you to the stories, and I read them aloud quite engagingly, like I am here. Nice. It shows the pages and the words as well, like Reading Rainbow used to do, so that kids who can't read can learn to read.
Okay.
They can buy all the books and content. All of the graphic texts are Next Generation Science Standard aligned, and they're made to spark children into action and civic engagement in the environment. And those books are available on any online bookstore. You can Google books by Leticia Colon de Mejias. The original educational success book is that stepping stone to figuring out kind of where you want to go next. The other thing is I do have stuff coming out. So I am working on more material. If you're an editor or you're a grant maker, please feel free to come my way. I would love to get more material out there for people. And if I had additional resources, I could do so.
Okay.
And then the other thing is that you could try to contact me through Green Eco Warriors. You can email, and I do have an executive assistant that does try to connect people that when I have time. So I do about 4 youth a year. So I have 4 right now. I do 1-year mentorships with young people. And then I'll take on an adult who is like a person of color who looks to seek to be in the clean energy industry. We're always hiring. So Energy Efficiency Solutions is my big boy company. You can Google EES Go Green. That company, we're always hiring people who want to work in the clean energy industry. We do train for careers. We're seeking people to be energy auditors, sales folks, installers, educators for the community, things like that. And I'm always building something new. So I always say to people, write your ideas down. Don't give up on your ideas. If you don't reach me immediately, use that time, talent, tenacity to continue exploring your ideas. And at some point, I believe that when things are meant to be, they come together.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. And I look forward to hearing more from you, especially that book about your life and your career. So
thank you so much. Blessings and joy. I love your show, and I'm so honored to be a part. So I hope everyone enjoys it, and I look forward to coming back someday.
Thank you. I'm just thinking, when can I hook up with her again? I think she's so amazing. I have so much to learn.
You've been listening to the F50 Woman Podcast. Join the F50 Woman movement and this diverse group of voices to help change the world one woman at a time. Why should you join at your age? Because we're not done yet.